Here on the ground, change happens fast. Problems feel frequent and urgent. It's loud and anxiety runs high. From a satellite view, the Earth looks the same as it did thousands of years ago. We've been here before. Let's learn from our past and shoot for a better future.
You know, Georgia's own President Jimmy Carter voted early. Bless him. Just days after his 100th birthday. So look, if Jimmy Carter can vote early, you can too. Because folks, the election is here. It's here. And I need you to continue to do what you do so well. Let's continue to energize. Let's continue to organize. Let's continue to mobilize. And let's remind folks that your vote is your voice and your voice is your power. And so, Georgia, I ask you, are you ready to make your voices heard?
That is Kamala Harris, the day before her birthday, which is today. I am Todd Mikkelson, the host of A Satellite View, and I'm speaking at you from October 20th, Sunday, 2024, in the space and time continuum, and it is Kamala Harris's birthday today. We all wish her a very happy birthday. Welcome to your new decade on Earth, Madam President-to-be. No, I'm not putting any kind of a curse on it. It is, you've been listening to this show. It's overwhelmingly obvious to me that she's going to win in quite a blowout. Now, we have a lot to talk about. I feel a little chaotic today. There was just so much. I did a preview. You might have seen a little video. I shot it on Friday, 2 days ago. And I feel like it wasn't accurate because so much has happened just this weekend, including this morning, including already today. Yes, Donald Trump went and worked the French fryer at McDonald's, and he looked like an idiot. He walks in and then he goes, "Should I take my jacket off?" And the press wants to see this. And he takes his jacket off, and it's like, whoa. Now we know why your jacket fits you like a tent. It covers up a lot, let's say. Now I'm not going to hold that against him, right? Okay. But I think you know what I'm talking about. And really, it's not his fault that he's got a pretty severe case of dementia going on. I don't wish that on anybody, even him. You know, you're not supposed to wish anything ill on a fellow human being. I question whether he's a human being myself. What has happened this weekend, just this weekend, the press and even a lot of mainstream media outlets are finally talking about his dementia. Some of them are even kind of going so far as to call it that. The funny thing about this, the line was drawn. Yes, okay. Yes, here's where the line was drawn, okay? Let's see if I can find this clip here. This is Fox News' Howard Kurtz. He interviewed Trump, I believe it was just yesterday. And then he reports here, right after his interview, he reports on how the rest of the day went for Donald Trump.
This here at Trump Tower.
Thank you very much. It's been fun. Thank you, Howard.
After our interview, Donald Trump flew to Pennsylvania, Arnold Palmer's hotel, where he discussed the golfer's signs of his manhood, dismissed Kamala Harris with a curse word, and asked the old Reagan question, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?
Yeah, so that's the report on Fox News. And Howard Kurtz gets to be the first one to, I think, say, because all of the Sunday morning shows have been on the subject of Arnold Palmer's, whatever we want to call it here. To me, I've been debating which word should be used. I think we all know what I'm talking about here, but we need to be clear. To me, the actual clinical word of penis is actually uncomfortable to me. It's more uncomfortable than some of the sort of slang words. Genitalia, also very uncomfortable to me. To me, it just seems like it sounds more comfortable and natural to say, why did Donald Trump at a rally get fixated in talking about the size of Arnold Palmer's dick? Okay. That's how we're going to put it on this show, because it's the least uncomfortable way of putting it. But that's what drew the line for the media to finally point out what is wrong with Donald Trump. Oh. So it had to take something, I guess. I saw a clip with Jake Tapper trying to talk to Mike Johnson, and it's just impossible. Mike Johnson's just impossible. But Jake Tapper was on this subject matter, and he's starting to act more like a human. A lot of the mainstream media people are starting to act more like a human, because I think they're starting to see that acting like a television robot just doesn't work out. Lester Holt talking about the strategy of Donald Trump talking about Arnold Palmer's dick. That doesn't work anymore. You just need to come out and talk like a human. We're going to talk a little bit about the media strategy that Kamala Harris has been doing. Lester Holt's going to tell you that Trump has a strategy. He doesn't. He's gone. They can't control him anymore. He hasn't been running a campaign for a long time. I think you go back more than a month, and one of my titles is Kamala's running a campaign and Trump ain't, something like that. This week for Trump has been really quite horrible. I can't even think of all the other things that, this Arnold Palmer's dick has overshadowed everything. I'm sorry. That's pretty childlike for me to be laughing that hard at that. But this guy's running for president. And he wasn't on the Howard Stern show. This is something you would go on the Howard Stern show in the 90s and talk about. Howard Stern doesn't even do that kind of thing anymore. And now Donald Trump is running for the president of the United States. That's why I'm laughing so hard. But I think that we're all feeling a lot better, because today, if you're watching the Sunday morning shows, even on regular media, you can start to see that it's starting to look like, 2 weeks ago I said, trust your sixth sense. Maybe it was last week. I can't remember, but you can trust your sixth sense. Yes, Kamala Harris is winning this campaign, and Trump is losing. Polls seem tight, but that's a lot because the Republicans have been doing the same thing that they did really a lot in 2022. I think they might have started doing it even before 2022, but they put out polls that are skewed to look like Republicans are winning. Last week, I reported there was, I believe it was 26 of these bogus polls that were being included in a lot of these averages, like 538 averages, which of course means the polls are super tight. This week, it's over 65, is last I heard a couple days ago, probably more now. 65 bogus polls going in to skew the averages in favor of the Republicans. You can see the lines in time. I'm trying to describe this as a visual thing, where you have a timeline from left to right, and then you have a blue line and a red line, and it shows the ups and downs of each. So if the blue goes up, the red goes down, because that means Kamala Harris has a higher number and it made Trump's number go down. They're kind of blipping up and down a little bit, up and down a little bit. She was doing better when she first started in July and August, and then the convention happened. And then starting at the beginning of October, maybe the final week of September, they come to a spot where Kamala Harris is about 2 points ahead, and they both just go straight. They're no longer bouncing. They're just staying there. And that's when all of these bogus polls got infused. The blue line comes down, the red line comes up, they almost meet, and then they just flatline. Now, if you go to North Carolina, the flatlining starts about a week or two earlier because those polls were infused into North Carolina in the middle of September because the Republicans are scared to death about losing North Carolina. It was really interesting to see how those lines ended up doing that. So when you're looking at these averages, and that's what most of the media outlets talk about, they just say, Kamala Harris is up 2 points nationally. Now, that's a great thing that she's up 2 points under those circumstances. That means she's probably up 5 points in actuality. And in fact, even with those circumstances, the 538 average is higher this week than it was last week. It's going up. Even with all of that against her, the average is going up. Some very high-rated polls. Another thing that's very interesting, I'm going to give you the results of 4 very high-rated polls that just came out on Friday. But what's interesting is because of all these bogus polls coming out, and actually people starting to pay attention and report on them. I didn't hear about this in 2022, but people like Simon Rosenberg, Tom Bonnier, they noticed it, and they're like, these polls are bogus. This is just stupid. We need to find different ways of tracking the elections. And because of all these bogus polls, there still are a handful of polls. Like, let's go back in time to 30 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago. You would have polling coming out, and there would be maybe 2, 3, maybe 5 polls. Now there's, 70, 80, 100? It's just insane. So most of those polls are bogus. So if we go back to the actual credible polls, where they do ask a large amount of people, so their margin of error is smaller, because it's a much more accurate way of doing it. They're established and highly rated polls, and they are starting to get the credit that really they still deserve. These are some polls that have been accurate when a lot of other polls were not. Some of these polls, like the Marist poll, Marist, if you want to look it up, it's been pretty correct throughout even 2022 and 2020. The TIP poll, TIPP. Okay, so I'm going to give you the results of these very highly rated polls that just came out at the end of this last week. I think they all came out on Friday. And they take these polls weekly. That's another thing. That's another way of staying more accurate. So the Economist YouGov poll came out. Kamala is up by 4. New York Times came out. And remember, New York Times everyone's been scared of it because Republicans were winning throughout the summer. Now, the New York Times new poll came out. Kamala is up by 4. The Marist poll, she's up by 5. Just like I said, if these averages say she's up by 2, she's probably up by 5. So says the Marist very highly rated poll. And the TIP poll has her up by 4. And we have seen Democrats overperforming, even in these accurate polls, since the Dobbs decision. And some of the other information that these guys look at is voter registration and early voting. And we're going to talk about that. I didn't gather a whole bunch of numbers because once you start hearing a bunch of numbers, you just kind of go numb and you can't remember any of them anyway. I was starting to chart numbers and statistics, and I decided this is just going to be stupid. I'm not going to sit here and, say number after number, state after state, and, stat after stat. I'm not going to do that. So we're just going to talk kind of in general about it. But I also want to talk about the change in media, another subject that I've been talking about for a couple of years, even before I started this podcast. And it's getting more and more apparent, and it's starting to kind of clear up so that we can start to put some definitions on some things. It's going to be really interesting when we come back on A Satellite View. This is the excitement. Kamala's back on the road, everybody. Yeah, so a great week this week for Kamala and us and the country and the world. Horrible week for Donald Trump. But that's Kamala Harris. Apparently some Trump supporters got into one of her rallies. They said something, and you could tell they were Trump supporters, and then that's what she had for them. Yeah, she's on it. She is on it. I mean, she's ready to do stand-up comedy at this point, which to me is the scariest thing you could possibly do. Kamala's back. The crowds are back. Huge, huge crowds. And she's going multi-states. On Saturday, she did at least 2, maybe 3 major events. She was in Arizona, and then Michigan, and then Georgia. I think it was. I can't remember. Anyway, she's just got these huge crowds going on. And also polling is breaking in local polling, like state polling, which again is more accurate because it's more focused on, a smaller group of people. It's not trying to cover the whole country. It's covering a state. And I believe in Michigan, she's ahead by like 5 points or maybe 6. I've seen a couple outlets have called Pennsylvania for Kamala Harris. I'm not all that familiar with these outlets I'm talking about. I didn't have time to look into them, but I noticed them just this morning, and I was like, that's pretty interesting. I've been tapping into some more information that talks even more deeply about numbers and maps. And it was one of these outlets actually decided that right now they're calling it Pennsylvania. Kamala Harris wins Pennsylvania. I wouldn't be surprised then if they call Michigan. It's the real numbers are looking really, really good. Really, really good. And even the polling, now I think you're going to start hearing, again, a lot of people who listen to this show, they get back to me and they're scared. It's because they're seeing these polls that are skewed by these bogus polls. But even with that going on, I think starting now, you're going to see even those polls look better and better for Kamala Harris. I think you're going to start to feel better overall, even without this show. Out there throughout the week, all by yourself in the scary world, I think you're going to feel better. But I'm still going to dig in. And I'm still going to give you the real skivvy, like I did in the last segment. Marist poll has her up 5 points to win. We are 2 weeks out, and she's up 5 points in the Marist poll. 4 in 3 other very top-rated polls, and doing better in others as well. Kamala Harris's media strategy. Oh, okay. Here's some stats. Let me say it before her media strategy story, which I think is very interesting. Georgia, first day of early voting, started about a week ago, I believe. By 1 p.m., they had 250,000 people already early voted in Georgia on the first day of early voting. That is 2 times more than the same time of day, 1 p.m. on the first day of voting in 2020. So by 1 p.m. on the first day of early voting in Georgia in 2020, there was 136,000, and everybody's mind was blown. That was a lot. By 1 p.m. this year, 250,000. Right now, almost 14 million Americans have already voted as of 2 weeks before the election day. Statistics as far as we do know registered voting. We know the percentages by party. Of course, in early voting, the Democrats are doing great. Now, Tom Bonnier, who you know from this show, if not otherwise, follow him on Twitter. He's got really good information. But Tom Bonnier said, in 2020, if you remember, we were under COVID restrictions. Donald Trump and the Republicans were saying early voting is corrupt. Mail-in voting is corrupt. You should not do it. But Democrats were like, well, I'm going to either mail in or do early voting because there will be a lot less people there because I don't want to die of coronavirus. This was before we had vaccines. Before Election Day in 2020, by the way, Donald Trump almost died. I think it was in September, maybe even October. Right before the election, Donald Trump got the virus, and if he would have been anyone else, he would have died. But because he was president of the United States, he got, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of extra care that saved his life. His chief of staff at the time thought he was going to die. I mean, it was crazy 4 years ago, which is another reason why you heard earlier in the show when the Fox News guy said that he also asked, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago at his rally? Okay, 4 years ago. Remember 4 years ago? People dying by the tens of thousands every day. Anyway, getting back to the point I was making, Tom Bonnier said, we really thought that in 2024, the Republicans have been trying to make up for that problem. So we really thought the Republicans were going to show up in early voting a lot more than they did in 2020. But they haven't. They haven't. Most of the numbers in different states, Democrats 70% and Republicans 20%, with maybe, anywhere from 7 to 9 unknown. In this day and age, probably most of those unknowns are going for Kamala. And in this day and age, who knows how many of those registered Republicans who have early voted also voted for Kamala. She's putting together a vast coalition, diverse coalition. So when you hear things like, oh, the Muslims are mad at Kamala Harris because of the war in Gaza, or Trump is picking up black young men voters, even if those things were true, there's just not enough of them to overwhelm what is going on. Trump is losing voters. Nikki Haley has offered she said, hey, I'm waiting for the phone call. I'll join him in campaigning, and he won't call her. He was even asked about it on Fox News, and he said, Nikki shouldn't have done what she did. She went against me. She fought against me. She shouldn't have done what she did. So he doesn't want Nikki's voters. I don't know. The whole thing is you need more voters than when you lost. He's got less voters than when he lost. You see how that works? Anyway, so the media. Kamala's media strategy is all but ignoring traditional media. You know what I'm talking about? She's been going on podcasts. Her media blitz over the last 2 weeks now, I guess. She's doing a lot of rallies with insanely huge and insanely energetic crowds. She's doing these alternative media. And this is what I've been talking about. A shift in media is going on. It's necessary. Even places like MSNBC and CNN are looking old, man. MSNBC, I think, has some superb shows. The Nicole Wallace show, Lawrence O'Donnell, Stephanie Rule, they're great. Katie Fang. They've got some really great shows on in the evening. But during the day, They do the same crap that everyone else does. I'll listen to it sometimes in my car, and it's MSNBC, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Steve Kornacki? That doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work anymore. And Kamala Harris's campaign is basically ignoring them and doing new media. And it's way more interesting. I will watch Simon Rosenberg talk for a full hour now, once a week. And the hour goes by, it seems like it's 10 minutes. Because it's really interesting, because it's a person talking to me. You know, I'm an old school broadcaster. I went to Brown Institute for Broadcasting out of high school in the mid-'80s, early to mid-'80s. I'm aging myself. Just slightly older than Kamala Harris, whose birthday it is today, we mentioned. Anyway, I'm a fan of, hey, welcome to Rocktober, everyone. We're here to Rocktober, and now let's play the next song. I'm a fan of the radio voice and the presentation and the jingles and I'm a fan of that, but we're done. It's done. It's gone. Kamala really did a great job on her Fox News interview. But wow, it was so combative. Bret Baier was trying gotcha questions. Same thing even happened on CNN with Dana Bash, who I think Dana Bash is probably, I would imagine she's voting for Kamala. So she's not even hostile, but it was still kind of hostile. And on Fox, it was more than hostile. And hardly any information was put out there. Whereas when she goes and talks for an hour on a podcast, like a Call Me Daddy podcast that she did a couple weeks ago, wow, we really get to see her as a person. She's an intelligent, interesting, compassionate. She's got, just like anybody, she's got multifacets. She's not forced to just answer a hostile question about a statistic or something. It's so much more interesting to hear these people talking on something like a podcast where they're just having a conversation. And even new media where, like I said, if somebody has their own podcast, like Simon Rosenberg, I'll sit and listen to him. And it's really, really an interesting thing to witness. I learn a lot from it. It's real people communicating like real people are supposed to communicate. When radio and television very first started, and then somebody thought, hey, we can sell commercial time, then it was time. We got to do everything quick. Hey, now when we come back, we're going to... That was fun. That was fun, okay? We did it for 80 years. Now, let's switch it up. And the whole world is becoming just more human and more humane. We're moving into a different vibration. We're turning into a new world. And traditional media has handled this election so absolutely poorly. They should be ashamed of themselves. Even the 60 Minutes interview was nothing compared to watching her on an hour-long podcast. Howard Stern. She had a conversation with Howard Stern that was really super interesting compared to the 60 Minutes interview where you're white-knuckling it. You're watching it going, oh, I hope it goes well because it goes so fast and you got to think on your feet. And it's just like, or even a debate, it's like, it's a one-time event. And if you say one word wrong, you lose the whole election. That's BS, man. I'd rather have you talk for an hour. And by the way, Trump's trying to do it too. You watch Trump try and be personable for an hour and you get to know him. That's very informative in this election cycle, which is why his people have been pulling him out. Like he did one with Dan Bongino or whatever his name is for about 10 minutes, and then his people pulled him out. He has refused to debate again. He canceled. He was scheduled on this long list of things, and he canceled the 60 Minutes. He canceled an interview on NBC. He canceled an interview on CNBC with a guy who's a total Trump shill, and Trump still canceled, even on that guy. He was supposed to have an interview with the Detroit News. He canceled. He was supposed to be at a big NRA rally in Georgia. He canceled. For the NRA had to announce, oh, we canceled our event. Another Pennsylvania event. He won't release his medical records. There was another event that was focused on like young black men. You would think he would want to be there. He canceled. His campaign is basically crashing to the ground. And Kamala's is soaring. That's the sound of soaring higher to the stratosphere. That's what that sounds like. We've run out of time again. There were some things, of course, that I wanted to get to that I did not get to. But please remember that all the things that I've talked about, review the last couple shows where I go a little more into depth about people registering to vote. People who just registered to vote are not part of these polls because they've never voted before and they weren't registered to vote. So they're not on a registered, a poll of registered voters, and they're not on a poll of most likely voters, although they are the most likely voters. But they're not counted in these polls that you're seeing. So add them. Add them to the Marist poll, because even the Marist poll, those people are not a part of the Marist poll because they're not on the list. So the Marist poll has her up by 5 points. Add all these just insane. A few weeks ago, it was 175% more women of color registered to vote than in 2020. An insane amount of people are registering to vote, which means they're going to vote for the first time. They're the most excited to vote. They've already done the work of registering to vote, which is even harder work than voting. So they are the most likely to vote, and they are not a part of these polls. So if she's up by 5 in a highly rated Marist poll, what will the final and only 100% accurate poll, which is the election results, how's she going to come out in those? It's going to be very interesting and fun to see. And we're 2 weeks away. Thank you so much for listening. Let's keep each other sane. We only got 2 weeks left until Election Day. And we're going to stick together after that as well. I'm feeling really, really great about this. So are other people like Simon Rosenberg and Tom Bonnier. And I think Kamala Harris, who's, I hope, having a really fun and happy birthday today. Thank you so much for listening. We will speak at you next week.
You've been listening to A Satellite View with Todd Mikkelson. Go to toddmikkelson.com for links and more information.